Now it is time for Mr. Moise. Mr. Moise, you have the floor. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me just pick a couple of threads from the earlier conversation. And my colleague asked about the green infrastructure funding and community groups that were waiting and organizations that were waiting for an answer on that. And as well, Mr. Bachrach spoke about applications through the Universal Broadband Fund that the Minister spoke about specifically in his community. I know there's many in my constituency as well. So, you know, and I mean, these are urgent projects, and the need is very real. And so what's the holdup, and is there something that can be done to expedite that? Because there seems to be, the answer seems to be it's coming, but can we be more specific than that?
So thank you very much for the question. The question about Universal Broadband Program is with our colleague department, Innovation, Science and Economic Development. Although we do fund broadband through the integrated bilateral agreements and have funded approximately 24 projects across the country for broadband. So those advance, and we do have a 60-day business turnaround time on our integrated bilateral agreements. And as mentioned, we've now advanced at this point in time about 40, actually, I don't think I've mentioned it, 4,700 projects under the integrated bilateral agreements for just over $20 billion. For the Green and Inclusive Buildings program, it was launched just last year. Then during the election period, we do not advance anything because we do not have a government to approve projects. It was extremely relevant across the country and have hundreds of projects applications before us. So, but you will see decisions on that, I think, imminently to show the various project approvals that are going to be made.
Great. Thank you. Look forward to those. You know, one of the things that's been concerning in the pandemic that I know everyone has thought a lot about is the rise in mental health issues. And one of the things that's, I think, helpful in addressing mental wellness is recreation facilities. And I recall back in the early 2010s, there was a federal program that made some infrastructure investments into recreation and things like conservation trails, conservation areas, hockey rinks. I know in my own constituency that was the case, and I think there was tremendous value for investment there. And I'm wondering whether that's something that the department has any plans to resurrect, or whether that falls within other programs currently under the bailiwick of the department.
So thank you for the question. Actually, yes, if I look at the integrated bilateral agreements, there is the community culture and rec stream of $2 billion that provinces and territories can avail themselves. Certainly the Green and Inclusive Buildings program that you just mentioned, but also we've recently launched, and it's been mentioned here, a $400 million active transportation program, which can get at walking trails, bike trails, footbridges to allow for outdoor use and active transportation for people to deal with health and mental wellness. I'd also point to a program that we launched called the Canadian Healthy Communities Initiative for $31 million. It was again a pandemic related kind of program that is about making small investments in communities to deal with healthy communities. So that was another area that can get at things like pop-up bike lanes, and ways to make our communities healthy as we try and get outside or do different things while we're living in a COVID environment.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, how much time is left?
You have 2 minutes left, Mr.
2 minutes left? Okay. Time for another question then. So one of the things in Southern Ontario that the Ontario government is investing a lot in is highway infrastructure, given particularly in proximity to my own self, the 401 and 403 are important trade corridors, and they're among the busiest highways in the world. And so I'm wondering, because I recall a lot of federal and provincial cooperation during the Great Recession on highway infrastructure projects. In terms of improvements in highways, bridge rehabilitation that happened around me, and I'm wondering whether there are similar initiatives amongst those 10,000 projects that we heard about.
So thank you very much for the question. When we look at trade corridors, there is a program at Transportation Canada called the National Trade Corridors Program that has invested in a number of different really important pieces of infrastructure that deal with trade and transportation. When we look at some of our urban highways, we have had the Building Canada Fund and the new Building Canada Fund historically funding a number of different investments in that area. In our more recent programming here at Infrastructure Canada, we're funding more public transportation to deal with some of the congestion and mobility issues that we need in our communities rather than urban highways. If we look at some of our rural areas, though, of course, that is eligible under our Rural and Northern Fund under the Integrated Bilateral Agreements, as well as in any community under the gas tax or the Canada Community Buildings Fund, that roads are eligible. So those would be some of the programs that I would point to for those types of investments.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gillis. Thank you very much, Mr.